Okay, so this is kind of in your face. What in the world is this? So this is the chassis for the next build that we're going to do here. I designed these, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. Only made 25, all with the serial number engraved into them. You'll see the serial number I'm using later on. Don't want to give it away right now. But basically, these take the place of a TXT chassis, a Tamiya TXT-1 truck. So redesigned the entire thing, and we call this the Bat TXT, kind of the Batman theme in a way. And you'll see by the other components. I don't want to lay them all out because I don't want to give away the final build. But these are the chassis that we're going to use. Polished aluminum, 6061 aircraft grade aluminum, commercially polished to a nice finish. There's still some polishing compound on these things, but these have been stored for, I don't know, 12, 15 years, something like that. I kept a few to myself, anodized a couple as a limited edition, so you might see a couple of these show up on eBay. I can only build so many trucks that look the same. So anyways, that's what the surprise is going to be as we build this out. So what's the drivetrain I'm going to use on this? So at first, I thought, because this is how I built my first prototypes, I'll use an Emax transmission. I designed, these are prototypes, but I designed the mounts for the transmission here, and these holes line up to the chassis here. Why the Emax? Okay, the little story for this one is I wanted all aluminum, as much aluminum as possible, and the Emax had a plastic case, but GPM at the time was making aluminum Emax cases. So I had contacted GPM, said, can you make me Emax cases, but I don't want them anodized. I want them raw aluminum. And then, because I want to polish them, you know, I wanted our own anodizing process. We polished them and then anodized. The third-party aftermarket product makers don't do that. So it's very costly. That's why it's huge cost actually to polish these things to a mirror shine. So anyway, so my first ones were done with aluminum Emax cases because I wanted to keep everything all aluminum. But I wanted to try to maintain some originality to the whole thing as well. So we machined our own aluminum cases. You'll notice the finish on these is raw aluminum. It doesn't have a rough texture to it. So this is raw aluminum. I have the actual one I'm going to use set aside. I don't want to show that right now because I think I just kind of want to have a little bit of a surprise element to it. But these are our cases that we designed. It's basically the same, you know. Back then, you got to remember, this was, you know, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago. So it wasn't, you didn't have like 3D printers and all these things that you had now that you can prototype, you know, for the home hobbyist. They were there, but they were very expensive. So anyways, this is our design of the TXT-1 aluminum transmission case. I'd like to say we were the first to come out before GPM ever came out with theirs. I just don't remember at the time, but at the time I wasn't interested in what everybody else was doing. We were trying to build show trucks. You know, everybody else was going after, you know, their niche, you know, in performance and things like that. I wanted to capture the show truck market, so I wanted everything to be blingy, you know, and it goes against the grain with some, but hey, you know, there's a little piece of the pie for everybody. So to take that point a little further, I got contacted. I say we because it's, it takes a lot of work. A few people help with all this. But I got contacted by someone that commissioned me to do something special for them. I made 2 of these. So this is a tranny case, the same design, the same model, except this is made from 24 karat gold plating. The metal is a 24 karat gold plating type of metal. It's not 24 karat gold, it's not, anything like that, but it's a special plating that they use with gold. And so I kept one, and the gentleman that commissioned got the other. So anyways, it's a nice thing to be able to design and have your own product. So that's, so I'm going to polish this up. Let's see how that works out. And then, I just let you in on a little bit of the secret, and then we'll see how this is all going to come together. So that's what we're building, a TXT Bat Clod. I'll leave a link in the description where you can go look at a lot of the projects that I've done. And the TXT Bat Clod is one of them. And so we're going to build another one of those right here. So stay tuned, and we'll see what's next. Okay, so what is this? This is a press. Why do I have a press in front of me? Well, this is a little bit of a story with the journey that I went through with these chassis. Again, I only made 25 of them for sale. They sold out. Never made any more, and I won't make any more. That was the commitment with making some of these chassis for the Clod and the TXT. I make this many, and that's it. No more. I wanted this to be all aluminum, as much as possible. Now, you got to remember, 15 plus years ago, there really wasn't any affordable aluminum rod ends. I mean, you can buy them now, but not 15 years ago. Even if you could find them, they were usually steel, not aluminum. You can't anodize steel very well. And they were unaffordable anyways. You're talking $10, $15 a piece. And here the truck needs, 16 just for the 4 links, and then, another 8 for the cantilever bars. So, we made our own, actually. So that's what this press is for. So let me show you how this works. Let me zoom in on this. Okay. So we had to make our own. I wanted them out of aluminum. I wanted to anodize. I wanted to polish them and anodize them so they have the wet look. Unfortunately, that was just way too expensive. Polishing, everything. So I settled for just raw aluminum because that'll go with anything, right? So there's a recess in this. Okay, that's where the ball will go. I used Kyosho steel balls for the rod ends. Everybody was using the big Kyosho rod ends at the time. They were beefy, they were monster rod ends. So I wanted to use the same, I made these the same size, inspired by Kyosho's rod ends. So how this works is the ball fits in that little recess in there. Okay, now on the top of that goes this little ring, and this little ring has a recess in it for the ball to move around. The top is flat. The top is flat, and then the recess where the ball movement goes is on the bottom. So what the press does is basically you line this up, and you bring the press down. The press will automatically align itself because there's a little groove on it, and push down. So now you can see that press fit the top portion of this rod end, and I can get a screw here. Okay, see? Now you can move that ball around. Now I tried it with aluminum balls to cut costs. It just wasn't going to work. Went through a lot of experimenting because the balls would pop out really easy. So this was about the best approach that we could take. So that's how I made our aluminum rod ends that went with these chassis. And aluminum, because again, this way I can anodize them, different colors, to match the theme of the chassis that we were building. So in the end, you had a nice result. This is the bottom link to the TXT-1. It's polished. I liked that the TXT-1 used beefy links. I think this is 5/16, if I'm not mistaken, in diameter. Again, mirror polished. Again, we were building show trucks, so bling was the thing. So that's how we came up with our rod ends. And that's how we did that. All right, keep going with the stories. Let's see what's next on this build. Okay, here I'm going to show you the axle cases we're going to use. I sold these, machined them and sold them about, I don't know, 15, 16 years ago. Sold out relatively quickly, but they were just expensive to make, so we discontinued them after they sold out. I just happen to have a couple of pair that I kept for myself, so I'm going to use 2 of these for the truck that we're building here. So I already have some of the parts pre-assembled. Didn't want to bore you with that because it's just basically assembling it out of the manual. It uses the stock TXT-1 and or TXT-2 parts. So let's see. I mean, this is all aluminum, 6061 aircraft grade, all CNC'd from billet. Nothing's cast. So let's go ahead and take this thing apart here. So this is the top piece, and the design was a bit creative to try to deal with some of the anomalies of machining a part out of aluminum rather than molding it out of plastic. Okay, so that's the inside. Very light, weighs practically nothing. So you'll see this uses stock TXT parts, but there's some little nuances to it. So this is one side of the drive shaft. You'll notice these little black Delrin holders here. These basically hold a bearing inside them. So this is the bearing that would have normally dropped into the case, but we put them inside this Delrin because it's easier to machine this and to try to machine all the grooves for the bearings. So that's one side. We have similar to the other side. There's the bearing. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and there's the differential. Put this all together. I've already put grease on it. So this basically just floats in just like that. I'm trying to be cognizant of the camera here. It's not that difficult, really. So we want to make sure that that center differential is on the larger part of this, to enlarged a little bit on the left-hand side to fit the gears there. And then this just slides in. Just like that. Now I'm going to bolt this thing down on each. Okay, now that we've got that tightened down, again, there's a couple of pieces here to the top portion, and I've already pre-assembled the gears here. Let's see if I can remember how I put these in place here. Oop. Lost the bearing. Hard to remember from memory how this all gets together sometimes. It's been a long time since I built one of these. There we go. All right. Okay. All right. And then this just bolts down right on top of that. Okay, so there we go. Nice and smooth. So the thing with these, I'm going to put the knuckles on next. These, I had these recessed, so there's a, I believe it's a 5x8 bearing, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe, I don't know. It's a bearing that goes, that's for the knuckle screw. The knuckle screw is a step screw, so it'll slide right into the bearing. So there's bearings for the top and also the bottom here. So that's what we'll put on next. A couple of knuckles. Okay, now for the knuckles, I've already pre-assembled them by putting the shaft in. I'm using a clawed shaft instead of the TXT shaft because I'm going to be putting clawed wheels on this, clawed aluminum wheels. The TXT shaft is just a little bit longer. So for this, like I said, I'm using a clawed shaft instead. But same thing, there's two bearings, one on the front, one on the back, and then an E-ring that basically holds the whole assembly in place. So this goes towards the back here. So this will mount something like this. Now, these are manufactured for me by GPM. The only thing that you need to modify if you're using the GPM knuckles is you need to file down just a tiny bit, maybe a millimeter, of one of the bushings, because the bushings together is just 1 millimeter too long. So that's the only thing. I manufactured our own knuckles, which fit this thing, but found out that they were 1 millimeter off compared to the normal GPM knuckles. So I have a couple of bearings for each side. So just pop these guys in. It's a nice press fit. So again, I'm trying to do this with the camera in mind, so bear with me. I'm not that inept at being able to put a screw through a little hole. Okay, and we'll just tighten these down. The other thing is we're using Wideners, our design, my design. This is how I got started in RC, actually. I bought an RC and kept tipping over. This was 20 years ago, and people were designing different kinds of wheel wideners out of all sorts of material. So I think I was one of the first ones, maybe 2 or 3 others, that came out with wheel wideners at the time. But this is how I made my mark, is on the wheel wideners. It's the first product I ever machined, mass-produced, and sold. And that's what these are. So the way they work is put the hex nut for the normal wheel that go in there. This would extend it out, but if you extend it out, obviously the shaft isn't long enough. So we have these steel extensions. So funny story is when I first started doing this, obviously you need an extension, but silly me made the extensions out of aluminum. So of course they just wouldn't, take the pounding that these things take. And so I kept just cracking them, breaking them like crazy. So these are forged steel, so they can withstand some pounding. And there you go. And then we'll attach, this will bring the wheel out, and we'll attach the aluminum wheel to it. So we'll do the same with the other side, and do the same thing with the other axle. So won't bore you with going through this, so let me come back, give you a status of where we're at. Okay, so after I put the knuckles on and built the other case, I went and took the time to polish the cases a little bit before I built them out a little bit more. So here's what I've got so far. So I have two of these guys built, because that's all we need right now. So what I did is these are our design as well. So I basically had these anodized. First I polished them, and then I anodized them, because the polish makes the anodized look wet. If you don't polish first, then the anodizing comes out kind of like a dull brushed color. So the detail, that I try to put into this is kind of meticulous. Polishing to a chrome-like polish, like the front skid plate here, and then anodizing. You'll get a wet look if you do it that way, especially if you anodize at home. Polish first. So basically, I put bumpers on, and then I polish the aluminum pieces that hold the front skid plate. I put the the black plastic skid plate. You don't really see it. That's what's going to hold the servo mounts. So I think the black offset the chrome pretty nicely. So anyways, yeah. So that's what I've got so far. We'll put the steering rods in. And obviously you kind of already can tell what the color theme is going to be for this truck. So let's see, aluminum cases for you. And no, I don't have any more for sale. They were discontinued a long time ago. So unless I sell some of the trucks that I built with these on them, that's it. You won't see them anymore unless someone wants to sell their pair. Again, these are not like any of the others. You can still see the CNC marks on these. It's raw aluminum. Nothing's cast. Everything's machined out of billet. Bearings on the top and the bottom where the knuckles ride. So, and then like I said before, we have our own wheel wideners. So that's the axles. Let's get a little bit more in tune with what we're going to do next on the body here. Okay, so now I have the chassis built. I didn't want to go through the enormous amount of time it takes, because it's just meticulous of screwing all the little pieces in. So I figured I'd put it all together and then show you what we've got so far, and provide any stories along the way. So this is serial number 1. There you go. Serial number 1, the bottom there. It's completely polished. There's a transmission case, all polished up as well. The remote tray for the top is custom. Not that there's any, wild thing about it. The battery tray is custom. Again, not that there's any wild thing about it, but I wanted to keep a little bit of the lines to go with the bat theme. And by the way, the bat theme came to be, I started with the Clodbuster. If you go to my Clodbuster, or if you go to the link to my projects, you'll see a bat clod in there. A gentleman by the name of Bone Daddy, who was on clodtalk.com back in the day, he was into Batman, and he basically motivated me, gave me a little push to design a bat clod, and that's what I did. And so I was more partial to the TXT-1 truck rather than the Clodbuster. So that's how I came about to design the Bat Clod and the Bat TXT. And again, the Bat Clod, just like the TXT, were limited in their numbers, and that'll be another build. I'll show you the parts and give you the stories for how that came about. So anyways, we got our tranny. We have all the screws have spacers on them. That just makes it look, I think, just a little bit more classy. So that's what the chassis looks like all put together. So what do we got to do now? Now we'll just start attaching things to them. We have the axle cases already built. I have the rod ends and the rods already done and polished up. So now it's a matter of piecing all this remaining parts back together. I still have to pick out the Clod wheels that I'm going to go with. I have a few different sets, so I'm still trying to decide on that. So let me put the axle cases and the four links and the cantilevers. The cantilevers. So I'm leaving stuff out. The cantilevers are a design of mine as well that match the theme. So, and the same with the body braces. So you got to stick around, or at least fast forward to see that. If not, just fast forward to the whole thing and just see the final build, what it looks like. But like I said, I'll try to figure out what was going on through my head and the story along the way, so you can go through the history with me. So stay tuned, and let me come back with this almost completely finished. Here's a little teaser as to what we have left. You can see the axle cases. And so far, about the only thing that's not aluminum is the little spacers on the rod ends, between the rod end and the link. And maybe the bushings that are, underneath, that hold the knuckle upright. Outside of that, there's maybe the front of the skid plate, that black piece, but very, very little that's plastic on this. And that's how we wanted to roll. That's how I wanted to roll with this. I'm coming out with it. So stay tuned. Just wanted to give that little tease. All right. So let's work on the links now. So a little bit of housekeeping. I already put stabilizer bars on the bottom links, so we just need to put the nuts back to hold these in place. So I have some rubber grommets and some washers. And we have some gold fixtures. The little nuts on here are gold anodized. Match the theme that we're going for here. So that'll hold the stabilizer bars in place. I know the zip ties look kind of hokey, but actually they're really not. It's the way Tamiya intended. I have metal clips that I've made, but I don't think the zip ties look too bad. So I'm just going to leave the zip ties instead of putting metal clamps there in place. Plus the metal clamps, if you hit a rock or something like that, they'll just jam up against the rock. These things at least have a semblance of being able to slide against the rocks. Anyways, so what we're going to do now is the links. So for the cantilevers, there's two sizes. There's the short and then there's the long. The shorter links go to the front and the longer links go to the back. So that's important. Should also note that the stock cantilever rods were only 3 millimeters thick or in diameter. So I replaced them with these that are just about a quarter inch polished and metal rod ends as well. So we kind of bling these out as well. So this is going to be the front, and the longer ones are for the rear. And then these are going to basically get screwed on in the middle here. So let's do that. Get some screws here. And I'm going to use a little bit of thread lock on these. So, okay, so that's the front. Found a simpler way to do this without having to take the entire bumper apart. It's pretty obvious that I could have just taken the top off of the transmission case or the axle cases here, and that gives me more than enough room to screw on the rod ends onto the bumpers. Okay, so that's going to be the rear because these rods are longer than the front. So now we're going to put the links. These are for the cantilevers. And then we have these guys here. So let's get these on to the bottom. Those are going to mount to the bottom of the bumpers here. And then we'll also mount the top links as well. Okay. And then we have the top. So I'm going to attach the rod ends on the top to the chassis first, and then I'll attach them to the axle cases. So again, this is the rear because of the long cantilever rods there, and this is going to be the front. So there we go. So next thing we're going to do is attach the long rods to the chassis. What I've been doing when I've been tightening these nuts on the side is keeping this part of the socket away from the chrome so it doesn't scratch it when I'm turning. And when the nut gets down to the chassis, I stop turning it with this so it doesn't scratch up the chrome. I turn it with the Allen wrench in the back, holding the nut in place. So that way the chrome isn't scratched by the corners of the nut. Okay, so there we go. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and prop this up here. I'm putting a spacer underneath here to give it more clearance, give the ball more clearance. Okay, we'll tighten those up in a second. Now we've got these guys here on the bottom. Okay, so just want to make sure I have the right length screw here for these. So we have that guy there. We'll tighten that up in a second. Let's get to the other side here. Okay. Okay. So that takes care of the front minus the cantilever. Once we get that in place, this will start looking the way it's supposed to look as far as the stance goes. So now let's do this side here. Oh, no. These are upside down. That's terrible. Why did I not see that? I need to flip these. So I'm not going to take the rod ends all out in order to flip them. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just take the stabilizer bar and flip it by cutting the zip ties and then re-zip tying it. Man, attention to detail. That's kind of important. Okay. Well, since we already have this sitting on the side here, might as well go ahead and deal with the cantilevers. So the cantilevers here are custom cantilevers. This is the top. The smaller, the longer is the bottom. So we got 4 cantilevers here. The interesting thing about these is the screw that holds these things on. Now, I made these to be able to contain the original bearings and all that. The screw is basically 5 millimeters in diameter to fit the bearing here, and then it drops. The step screw drops to 4 millimeters in diameter. That prevents the screw. This step prevents the screw from flowing all the way through the chassis. It stops right there. Then this part, the 4 millimeter part, goes through the chassis, and then it's screwed on the back end by a nut. So these screws are hard to find. Now, you could probably make your own with a 5 millimeter step screw and then machine a millimeter off, and then, thread the end if you need to. So it's not like you can't machine these, but they are hard to find because they're just a weird part. So kind of sucks that they kind of do that, but it's the way it is. So anyways, so this rod end is going to go attached to the cantilever here. I'm going to attach it to the very end of it. The shock is going to be mounted at the top, and it's going to be mounted on the top side of the cantilever here. So let's get this thing put in place here. Okay. Okay, so what I'm finding is that the cantilever here at the top, the screw that I put in holding this brace is a little too long. It sticks out a little tiny bit, like about 1/16 of an inch off the back, and the cantilever's rubbing against it. So I'm going to have to replace this screw here with something a little shorter. Okay, there we go. So that leaves this cantilever to be attached there, like so. And actually, let me take this back. Here's one thing that we forgot about this cantilever here. One thing we forgot to take into account. That's why that screw wasn't bad. What I forgot to take into account that would have pushed this cantilever out a little bit more is a washer. It's supposed to go here. All right, here we go. Okay. Okay, so we don't need a spacer for these. This should screw right onto the bottom of this cantilever here. Okay. So there we go. So I'm going to replace this one screw on the front also. You can see the screw right here is sticking out far too much. So I don't want to risk it rubbing the cantilever in any way. So I'm going to go ahead and replace that screw as well. There we go. All right. So one cantilever in place. So I'm going to do the others and replace these screws on each of these mounts here with smaller screws. So let's do that. All right. So now we're done. All right. So what we need to do now basically is we can take this off now. Is get our shocks put in place here. So let's go ahead and do that. I have a couple of options for shocks. All right. Let's see what we've got here with these shocks. I made some smaller spacers for it so the shock can clear the chassis, which I think it will, just like that. So let's figure out what size screw we're going to need here in order to get this in play. Okay. And then how high we want to go with this determines on which part of the cantilever this goes to. I'm thinking we put it on the second one from the top here. So let's do the second one from the top. That looks good. All right, that's how we're going to roll in. These shocks are still good. I can feel the oil inside, and they are over 15 years old in the package. It's amazing how they held up. You would think they'd be leaking or something by now. In case you're wondering why I didn't use the gold little nuts on the inside of these, it was because I actually ran out. So you can't really tell. These are on the inside and they're chrome, so they kind of match up with the shock. But just fessing up. That's why I didn't use those accented nuts on the inside of these shocks. All right. That's what we got so far. That is nice. Nice, nice, nice. Okay, so now we've got these guys here. Let's get these in order. Okay, that's just about done. What about the battery tray? That's this piece right back here. We need the little battery ends for it. So the way the battery tray worked is we have these ends that the battery gets screwed by 2 screws that have this on the top to hold the battery down, and the screws go through the plate there. You don't need these. You could use zip ties, rubber bands, or whatever to go through, but I'm going to go ahead and put these on just because I have them, just to show what this was capable of. All right, that's what that looks like. Okay, so final steps here. We're going to add a few things. Our wheels. So I decided to go with old school, the pin spike tires. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to throw some wheel wideners on here. This is how I got started, man. This is the first product I ever made was these wheel wideners. Didn't even know what I was doing at the time. So we've got one widener in there. So what we need is the steering rods, of course. But just for the sake of getting this thing done for this video, I think we'll probably, well, we should put the whole thing together, including the steering rods, right? It's only going to take another couple minutes. Okay, let's get these front steering rods in. So I made these out of a 1/4 inch rod, and obviously polished. So the rod goes underneath on the underneath the knuckle, because this is going to have 4-way steering, and so I need to make room for the rod to the steering servo at the top. I'm not going to put that in place right now, but that's why we put this. Also, these knuckles, you'll note that if you look at the knuckles from the front, the knuckles are not, they're not symmetrical in terms of where this lies. This sits a little higher up, so you can put the rod underneath. So be cognizant, you know, of the space that you might have inside your bumpers. If you have more space at the top, you might want to reverse these. But anyways, the bottom line is the knuckle, this piece right here, is a little bit higher up from center. So that way it allows me to place the steering rod underneath. I'm going to take these wheel wideners off right now. Okay, it's good enough for now. All right. Okay, we are almost done here. We want to turn this around because we need to connect the drive shafts. Okay, so now here's the deal with the drive shafts. We can use the TXT drive shafts that came with it. Or what I'm prone to do is, these are old school. It's a universal joint set. It's nylon, but you can dye these with RIT dye, RITDYE, RIT dye. You can get it from pretty much any pharmacy or any arts and crafts store. Different colors. You just boil water, throw the RIT dye in it, and drop these in there for a little while, and then they will turn that color. So, for example, this is purple. So this was put in purple RIT dye for a past purple project. So you can see how that turned out. And then the other thing that you can do is, these are, I believe, off of a Traxxas. So there's these shafts here that will also work, you know, in here. Now these are plastic. These here have a metal. The piece that slides in and out is metal. So there are different quality to these things. So if I use these, they'll be black. Kind of goes against the grain with the chrome. I can RIT dye these in orange, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use these in clear. Seems kind of like a cop-out, but I don't know if I really want to spend the time to go and do the whole RIT dye thing. Okay, so basically I put these together. We're going to use this. We're not going to dye them orange. We're going to leave them just like this. So the way that these fit is you have this little piece here. Give you an idea here. And that piece comes into this bigger part here that's going to go onto the drive shaft. Oops. And it goes in like so, and there's a little hole here. This pin goes through, and this pin, as it goes all the way through, this pin has a hole in it. And it basically goes flush, goes all the way through, and goes flush with the other side. I can get this thing through here. Okay, and that hole in the middle of the pin, as well as the holes here, I basically take this pin that's going to go through it, just make sure that it's aligned. See, so this way it goes through. Once it's aligned, you take your shaft and you push it over that center pin there, and then this pin goes through the shaft all the way through, like that. And then you have your E-clips, these little tiny E-clips that you see here, and those get pushed into each side of the pin on the top and the bottom. And that's how this is held together. Okay? So we don't use these pieces down here, so that was just mainly to show you how this all gets fitted together into this. Now this is going to go on one drive shaft on the axle case, and then this allows it to telescope, and then this piece is going to go onto the tranny case, and then these pieces here will get screwed in, and the shafts on the tranny, I'm going to show you in a second, have a little hole through them that this pin is going to go through. Okay, and that's what will hold the shafts in place. Okay, so let's do that now. Okay, so you can see here on the top, this has a hole in it. So this is going to slide right in, and then this is going to screw all the way through, and it's going to go through that hole. And then you're going to screw it in place. If I can get the right. It'll just screw itself into the plastic or the nylon here, just like so. And that's what will hold the pin in place. See? So then this part here will telescope in. If I can get the channels lined up here. Okay. And that'll go into the tranny here. So I'm going to have to cut, I think, a little bit of this because it's way too tight. So let me do that. I'm going to cut like about quarter inch of this telescoping shaft here to make this fit. Because there's not, I can put this in, but the shaft is too long, so we're going to cut it a little bit. Okay, be right back. Okay, so now we're going to take these screws out to be able to move this out so I can telescope this and get this together there. Okay, here we go. Now I can slide this in. There we go. All right. Because I needed to only take out one side, I guess. No. I need to take out both. We have such clumsy hands. Okay, there we go. Very little play in that, which is what I want. All right, so we're going to do the same thing for the other side. All right. Moment of truth. If this binds, then that means I need to cut a little bit more, grind a little bit more off. Otherwise, I may have just gotten away with it. That would be stellar. That way I know for the future 37 millimeters is the magic number. All right. Nope, that's great. Cool. So we are pretty much done with this. Okay. Okay, so what do we got now? So we've got the drivetrain done. I'm glad I didn't go with black, and like I said, I can always dye this down the road. Dye it orange, but leaving it clear I think was the best option for now. So wheels and tires. Old school. Wanted to go old school. So let's go ahead. I got the Wideners here. That's how I started this in this biz. Most people build crawlers. I built crawlers, but I like the show truck thing, the bling. The trucks have won a lot of awards overseas, or people that have bought these trucks, because there's a lot of customizing that you can do. So having a cool show truck that's actually functional is great. Will it kick ass on any rock crawlers? No. Will it win any races? Well, maybe, because it is a TXT after all, but it's, the aluminum cases are light. It's all aluminum, so it's not very heavy, but I think it's probably maybe a little bit maybe heavier than regular TXT. But in the end, like I said, it's a TXT. So, couple of little bits. We've got these guys here, body braces. So that kind of completes the whole bat theme to it all. Little plastic washers so the body doesn't get damaged from underneath. Wheels and tires. So, old school. All aluminum. From back in the day, even the pin spike tires. So let's get these things put on. Let's see how this is going to look. Make sure this goes all the way through here. There we go. There we go. There's a good amount of thread. And hey, I'm not going to put regular, after all of this, I'm going to put regular 4mm screws on here. We have our custom bat knockoffs that we're going to throw on there. So one thing about these custom knockoffs is that you can't just put them onto the end of a socket like you can just a regular 4mm nut. You got to be creative getting these things on. Okay, let's get the other side here. All right. 2 more, and then I think this will be a wrap. All right, so here is the final build. We've got our aluminum wheels with our bat hubs. Skid plate aluminum axles, axle cases, the bat theme, Serial number 1. So there you have it. Now, what's missing? We're missing a body. So let's see what we've got. So I just happen to have a little something here. So let me take off the plastic on the top before I unveil it here. All right. Let's see how this is going to look. I'm going to pull away for just 1 second while I put it on. All right, we ready? Here we go. So this was custom painted for me, I don't know, about 15 years ago. And just never quite had the right truck to put it on up until now. So this has been waiting in storage for almost 15 plus years, just waiting for the right build. And this was the right build. So, I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you got something out of it. Hope I made some mistakes that kept you from making the same. And hey, like I always say, you only live once. Enjoy life to the fullest. There's plenty of opportunities for fun. Seize the day. Peace out.